Gonzaga's payout from the Pac-12 is going to give them a huge financial advantage, regardless of where the media rights deal ends up.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first bet of $5 or more wins. Well, folks, Chet Holmgren and the Oklahoma City Thunder took home an NBA Finals championship. We'll talk about that briefly. The Pac-12 has a new flagship media rights partner in CBS. We're going to get more into both of those things on Tuesday's show because today is a mailbag episode. We'll talk about both those things as well as an update on Mario Saint-Superi, some other fun stuff to get to on the media rights and expansion topics as well. Lots of questions to get to, so we're going to get right into it. This first question here comes from Jim on Facebook, who says, what's your best guess at how much money Gonzaga will make from the new media rights deal with the Pac-12, factoring in performance incentives? Yeah, this is a topic that we haven't broached a ton yet on Locked On Zags because we're, of course, still waiting for the full financial picture of the media rights deal. I'm recording this about an hour after it was reported on Monday morning that CBS will be the flagship partner for the Pac-12 through the 2030-31 season. This is not a shock for anybody who's been following this story. CBS was signed up with the Pac-12 football schools for this upcoming season, so we kind of expected they were going to be one of, if not the biggest partner for this deal for the Pac-12 going forward. So we'll get more into the CBS deal, break it down, all that on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Zags. But looking at what we're kind of projecting for the Pac-12 media deal, as well as what we expect from the Pac-12 in terms of performance incentives and how that could benefit Gonzaga, I think we're looking at a fairly hefty sum of money. And I think a lot of times people right now who are kind of panicked or concerned or worrying about the Pac-12 media deal are comparing it to schools like in the American Athletic Conference, like Memphis and Rice and Tulane. And they're looking at the amount of money that those schools are making in totality, like including NCAA tournament units and college football playoff units and things like that, as opposed to the media deal. I've seen it float around like Memphis makes $11 million, and there's no way the Pac-12 is going to have a media deal that pays $11 million. Memphis makes about $7 million from the media rights deal from the American Athletic Conference. They make their other money, whether it's $4 million, I don't know the exact figures. They make that from NCAA tournament units, from college football playoff performances, from various other things outside of the specific media rights deal being paid out to the conference. I say that to say this. I think that the media rights deal for the Pac-12 will top what the media deal is in the American Athletic Conference. I think they will work voraciously to make sure that that is the case. I don't know by how much. The number that have been kind of floating around in my head as my prediction, as we're probably only a couple days away from finding out, is something like $8 to $8.5 million. Like, I think that's where it's going to be. You've seen some places that say 10 to 12, some places that say 7 to 9. Like, I think it's going to be on the little bit lower end. The Pac-12 has made it very clear they are prioritizing exposure and being able to be in as many households as possible over the financial figures. So they're going to, like, CBS makes sense. Everybody can get CBS. There are going to be some games on Paramount Plus, which I know won't be everybody's favorite. Frankly, I think Gonzaga will probably avoid Paramount Plus for the most part, but they're going to also have the CW, which is obviously something that everybody has access to. So that's what they're prioritizing. Having said that, if the media deal is something around $8 to $9 million, let's just cut it in half, say $8.5 million. Gonzaga is going to, every reporting we have gotten is that Gonzaga is a full share. So they're going to get the same amount of money in that media rights deal as the other programs currently in the conference, the 5 move overs from the Mountain West, as well as Oregon State and Washington State. But then they're also going to distribute NCAA tournament units and college football playoff appearances and bowl games. And Gonzaga, to be clear, is not getting any of that money. That's already established. The money that is split among all the bowl game appearances for the Pac-12 will not go to Gonzaga, nor should it, if we're being honest. Like, if there was a school in the conference that did not support basketball, I would not want them to get a cut of the NCAA tournament units because that would not make sense. So I'm fine with Gonzaga not getting that football money, but Gonzaga is going to get a cut of the NCAA tournament units. And again, for those who don't know, NCAA tournament units are typically worth about $2 million over a 6-year period of time. They pay out over 6 years. So if 4 teams from the Pac-12 make the NCAA tournament, that could be as $8 million paid out across 6 years for those schools. However, and I don't know the specifics of this, I dug and dug and dug, and I was not able to find out. I might reach out to some contacts, see if I can get some more info. But similar to the WCC, albeit not as dramatic, the Pac-12 is going to pay a higher percentage to the teams that are succeeding. In other words, Fresno State, sorry for catching a stray, other Bulldogs, but they're not going to get the same amount of money as Gonzaga is going to get, assuming Gonzaga continues to make the tournament, make the Sweet 16, do what they're doing, while Fresno State toils away at the bottom of the conference. So Gonzaga is going to get a good, hefty chunk of the NCAA tournament units, while also getting a full share of the media rights deal, which is probably going to be in that, again, the range is as wide as 7 to 12, but I think it's probably closer to $8 to $9 million per school. So that's a rough look at where Gonzaga is going to be. I wouldn't be shocked if they're clearing 10 mil per year from the media deal, the NCAA tournament units. And then if they can raise some money and make some cuts, things like that, they could be up in that $11, $12 million deal. But as we've been saying, and I'll repeat here, Gonzaga is going to be able to spend a higher percentage of their money on men's basketball than every other school in the conference. If San Diego State's clearing $12 million a year and Gonzaga's clearing $10 million a year, Gonzaga's probably going to spend $7.5 to $8 million of that on men's basketball. San Diego State's going to spend $9 of their $12 million on football. Maybe not 9, maybe 8, but that still only leaves $4 million for all the rest of their sports. Gonzaga's going to have twice that on men's basketball, probably. We're guessing, we're speculating, but that seems to be a likely outcome, putting Gonzaga in a very advantageous position as we wait for the final details of this Pac-12 media deal to come together, likely this week. Next question here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, there seems to be some smoke to the rumors that Memphis could end up playing football in the Pac-12 with most of the rest of their sports, including basketball, playing in the Big East. I wonder if that does happen. Could such a move include a basketball scheduling agreement between the Pac-12 and Memphis and or the Big East? Also, I wonder if that could lead to UConn also playing football in the Pac-12. It seems like the only way Gonzaga would ever vote yes is if those moves included a basketball scheduling agreements. If a football only move happens with Memphis and or UConn, when do you think such a move might happen? Okay, a couple things to get here. Yeah, I agree that Gonzaga is probably not going to be thrilled about Memphis and or UConn joining in a football-only membership. But again, the Pac-12 doesn't have to, they don't have to accommodate them here. This was some of the fears that people had about Gonzaga joining a conference that cares more about football, is that Gonzaga doesn't have the power to make the conference do what they want them to do. They need I think a 75% vote. If Gonzaga is not one of those votes, but every other school says yes to Memphis, which they probably would, then that's tough for Gonzaga. That's tough for Gonzaga. I think that they'll voice their concerns. However, a scheduling agreement with Memphis for basketball or the Big East for basketball is not only advantageous to Gonzaga and would probably sway them into voting yes, it's advantageous for the entire conference. I don't see why the Pac-12 would not attempt to get this done. I suppose I could see why Memphis and or the Big East would be hesitant to agree to it. I don't think the Big East cares enough about adding Memphis sports to be like, yeah, we'll happily send all our teams across the country to play a inferior basketball conference, not by a lot, but a weaker basketball conference. So it does depend on if the other side wants to do this. But I think Memphis would do it. I think Memphis would agree, hey, we'd love to add our football, and we'd love to play Gonzaga every other year. And then the alternate year we play either San Diego State or Boise State or Utah State or whomever. Like, that makes a ton of sense to me. And that's great news for Gonzaga if they're able to get that done. Obviously, even better so with UConn. But I just don't think Gonzaga has enough pull to make this happen. And certainly it depends on if the other side wants to do it or not. In terms of when this would happen, yeah, I think 2027 is the soonest, maybe more like 2028. But there's just so many additional factors that I'm not privy to that are going on behind the scenes that make it hard to make a super concrete projection on when that might happen. Well, folks, if you're watching on YouTube, you see him repping the jersey. Chet Holmgren became the latest Zag to win an NBA championship in a heartbreaking loss for the Indiana Pacers. We're going to get into that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the summer sports are in full swing. And so whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf out on the greens, or some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every single sporting event just a little bit more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends or getting sunburned out on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action, and right now, Gonzaga plus 3,000 to win it all in 2026. For what it's worth, since we were talking about the potential basketball or football-only additions, UConn is at plus 1,700. Memphis, Penny Hardaway's team, got a little bit of a tough sledding here. They're at plus 20,000 to win it all. And if you're new to FanDuel, folks, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still going through Mailbag Monday here on a Monday morning following the news. The Pac-12 is out of the CBS as a flagship media partner for the conference for the next 5 years. Also following the NBA Finals Game 7, that's what we're going to talk about here. Brandon via Gmail sent in an email and said, not a question, more of a statement, but it can't hurt recruiting to have a player from Gonzaga starting for each team in the NBA Finals. I know you've brought it up on the show before, but it's so cool to have it happen in the Game 7. There was a moment in the fourth quarter, about 3 minutes to go of this game, for those of you who are watching. And at the time, Indiana had been down as much as 18-20 in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma City really pulled away in the third, but Indiana had chopped it back up to like 13, 12, 10. They were still in it. This game was not over. It was a Game 7 closing minutes. And Andrew Nembhard drilled a three right over Chet Holmgren, right over his outstretched arms. I've been looking for a picture of Nembhard's release with Chet's hand right in his face. Nembhard did nothing but the bottom of the net. That took it from a 13-point game to a 10-point game. Chet flew down the floor, got an outlet pass out in transition. Nembhard got back, tried to get back in time, was unable to do so. Chet threw down a big dunk. Those two things happened in about a 30-second span. And what a cool moment. What a cool moment that it was to see Andrew Nembhard score on Chet Holmgren, Chet Holmgren score on Andrew Nembhard in the closing minutes of the first Game 7 in the NBA Finals in nearly a decade. It was an incredibly cool moment. We're going to talk more about Chet Holmgren's legacy after winning this championship, where it puts him among Gonzaga greats in the NBA already in his career. We're going to talk about the same with Andrew Nembhard. This is going to be a big part of Tuesday's show, so I'm not going to get all the way into that. Both played great in this game. Nembhard had 15 points, 6 assists, 5 boards. Chet had 18 points, 8 boards, and 5 blocks. He was 6 of 8 from the field. Tremendous to see these two guys have that success. In terms of Brandon's question or statement or thoughts about recruiting, yeah, it absolutely helps with recruiting. I would be hammering this home if I was Mark Few and Gonzaga. We've talked extensively about the advantage we think they have in the short term in terms of knowing that they have a bigger amount of their conference's media rights deal to them to spend on men's basketball, while other programs, even SEC Big Ten schools, are focused on spending their money on football. So I think for Gonzaga, they can offer more financial relief right now to players, but they can also say, look what's happening in the NBA. Look at the starting lineups for the two teams that were in the finals. Look how many teams were represented more than once. It's just us. We are the only team that had 2 players starting in the finals. Kentucky had 3 overall players, but one of them barely played at all. Like, this is the program. Arizona had a couple guys, shout out to them, but this is a huge advantage for Gonzaga. And I think that's why you're starting to see some players, who are top 20, top 15 in their class, visiting or at least showing interest in visiting. This has happened before, but it's more consistent now. And I absolutely have to think that the success of Gonzaga players in the NBA, not just these guys, but obviously Domantas Sabonis and Corey Kispert and Brandon Clark and Rui Hachimura, Kelly. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And Chet and Andrew are a huge part of it. And being on the big stage really, really helped this program elevate to even another level, which just seems so hard to believe considering how far this program has already come. Next question comes from Bulldog Kenny on Discord, who says, why have we not heard any confirmation on Mario Saint-Superi? Any concern the signing fell through? Yeah, I'm not worried yet. It's been reported so many times that Mario Saint-Superi is coming over from Spain to the United States to play college basketball at Gonzaga. I've heard internally from sources in the program that this is something that's been in the works for a really long time, going back to the early stages of the offseason. Like, this is not a just a rumor that we're hoping is true. Like, this has been more or less confirmed by multiple sources. It just has not been confirmed by Mario or Gonzaga. And yes, that's what we're waiting for. Like, we would like to see it confirmed from one of the two of them, or at least like a very reputable source, like somebody like Theo Lawson at the Spokesman Review, or somebody like that who covers the team. Because right now we've just seen it from like EuroLeague websites or international places, like places where it's not that I don't trust them yet. It's just that we just haven't seen any confirmation. Until Mario puts Zags men's basketball in his Instagram account, there's always going to be a little bit of concern. But I ultimately think this is going to happen, and I think it's going to happen fairly soon. I know I've been saying that, but the sooner they can get him on campus, the better they're going to feel, and I think they're going to want that to happen very soon. Final question in the segment here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, the matchups for the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas have not yet been announced. If you could pick Gonzaga's first-round opponent, which team would you pick? Also, which two other teams would you pick to be in Gonzaga's quad? Yeah, so this is a fun one. There's a bunch of teams in this tournament, a bunch of teams that Gonzaga's already planning to play, some teams that I don't really care for them to see. I want to keep this somewhat realistic. Like, it'd be great to just say, oh, I would love for Gonzaga to play Auburn, Houston, and Kansas, or something like that, like the best teams in the event. But that's not how the pod's going to line up. They're going to split up teams by conference, and they're going to put some of the weaker teams in some of those pods. They're not just going to, throw all the 4 bad teams together and all the good teams together. So here are the teams that I don't want to see. Baylor and Creighton, I'm just crossing out because Gonzaga is already going to play them this year, so they're not going to be in their region. So we're just crossing them out. St. Joe's, San Diego State, only because they're about to be a conference foe. UNLV, Syracuse, Rutgers, Oregon, Notre Dame. Those are my not so much. Oregon would be fine. Oregon's not one, and so would Syracuse. In fact, I actually think I am going to take Syracuse because we need to take one of the quote-unquote bad teams, and I think they're one of the better ones. But the ones that I'm more likely or more inclined to want to see, Auburn, Houston, Alabama, Iowa State, Kansas, Michigan, St. John's, Tennessee. You need 2 of those. I think if you get 2 of those, you feel real good about this tournament and this event and the schedule that it kind of gave to you. So if I was putting it together, give me Syracuse to start. A former Big East team, a team that Gonzaga has history with, an ACC team currently, so it doesn't mess up the difference, having all the different conferences and in different pods. Give me Syracuse. I like that one to start. And then I'll take Houston for the rematch against Kelvin Sampson's team. They have Isaiah Harwell and Kingston Flemings on that roster, guys that Gonzaga recruited. There's a lot of recent history with that program right now. Give me Houston. Syracuse, Houston, and then after that, I'm taking St. John's. Taking St. John's out of the Big East. Rick Pitino would be fun to play against him. They got a guy from Washington State who also played Idaho State, Dylan Darling, on the roster. I think there's some fun there. Pitino versus Fia would be a blast. So Syracuse, Houston, St. John's would be my ideal pod, with apologies to Kansas, who's always fun, to Michigan, who I think is fun in the new era with Dusty May, to Bama and Auburn. Like, there's a lot of great teams in this thing. It's hard to imagine it goes poorly. It's hard to imagine it ends up in a way that's just like not fun at all, unless they get like UNLV, Rutgers, and Notre Dame or something like that. But that's just very, very unlikely to happen. I'm very excited about this event and very excited for when these matchups do come out. No idea when that's going to happen. With this many moving parts, I could see it taking a while, but man, it's going to be fun to see who Gonzaga lines up against in Thanksgiving this year. Well, will Gonzaga's men's or women's all-time leading scorer be the next jersey to be hung in the rafters, or could it be somebody else? We're going to talk about that and a few other topics to close out the show coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show with a couple more mailbag questions here before we get more into the Pac-12 CBS deal and the NBA Finals for Tuesday's show. This next question here comes from Jim on Facebook. He says, who will be the next Zag to have their jersey hung in the rafters at the kennel? Yeah, so here's who's got their jerseys already up. Frank Burgess and John Stockton, they've been up there for a while. I think those are the 2 jerseys where they're actually like retired. Like, you don't have players wearing number 12 or number 44 for Gonzaga. The rest of the jerseys that are hanging up are not retired in the sense that they're not using the numbers anymore. They're just like kind of honored with their jersey up there. So that would be Adam Morrison, Kelly Olynyk, Dan Dickow, Courtney Vandersloot, and most recently Domantas Sabonis. So those are the jerseys that are hanging in the rafters. Who's next? To me, it's down to the 2 most prolific scorers in Gonzaga basketball history who both finished their careers very recently. That would be Drew Timme on the men's side, who is the men's all-time leading scorer, and then Yvonne Ejim on the women's side, who is the women's all-time leading scorer and the entire school's all-time leading scorer as she passed Drew Timme in one of her last games last year. Feels like it's going to be one of those two. I would suspect Drew is first because his career ended more longer ago than Yvonne's did. So I think that makes him the more prime candidate to go first. That would be the number 2, thrown up in the rafters. Getting Drew back on campus, getting Drew behind a mic to talk, to get celebrated would just be a really fun event. That's a slam dunk for good PR, good publicity to have him on campus and doing that. So I think that would be awesome if you could get Drew, especially now that he's in the NBA with an NBA contract. I think that makes it even more appealing to bring him back on campus and have him do that. I mean, you look at the list of jerseys that are hanging up in the rafters. They're all people who played professionally at the highest level. Every single one of them was in the NBA or WNBA, with the exception of Burgess from a very long time ago. But so I think that does matter. That is an important part of this. And I think that Drew being on an NBA roster right now helps. And unfortunately, it is a knock for Yvonne. I don't think it should be, but she's not playing in the WNBA right now because those rosters are just too small, and she wasn't able to make the cut. So I think that Drew is first. I think Yvonne will end up happening. I'd be kind of crazy if it didn't, considering how many records she has for this program. But there are also a few others. Like, I don't want to pretend it's only those two who are options to have their jersey hung in the rafters. I could see it with Corey Kispert, 4-year guy, All-American, current NBA player. I could see with Rui, similar, 3-year guy, All-American, current NBA player, very, very good, Olympian. I could see it with some other guys that are maybe a little bit more, a little less likely, but still possible. Kevin Pangos, jersey number 4, was a prolific player at Gonzaga, did not have the professional career. I mean, he had a great professional career, just not in the United States. Nigel Williams-Goss wasn't there for very long, but he was the point guard on a team that went to the national championship. That's hard to ignore. Jalen Suggs, but only a 1-year guy. Like, those are a little bit trickier. I think it'll be more likely to be 3 or 4-year guys who are currently playing professionally, guys or girls, I should say, but it's fairly limited. That's just not a very many of those. Like, do you do Heather Bowman? She played a long time ago, but she was Gonzaga's all-time leading scorer until Yvonne passed her. Like, that makes some sense. But again, she's not playing in the United States professionally. So there's a lot of options. But again, if I was a betting man, I'd be putting my money on it being either Drew or Yvonne for the next jersey up in those rafters. Next question comes from Jeff. He says, since the House settlement was made official, we saw Washington State cut about 1/3 of its track and field team. Additionally, Oregon and Washington said post-House related issues are leading them to cut about 15 to 20% of their scholarships and overall budget. I wonder, could Gonzaga, just by keeping its sports and scholarship levels where they are, end up being a big winner in the post-House era, as many other schools are cutting and or reducing their non-football sports? This is an interesting topic. It's an interesting conversation because I think there's a couple different ways to approach this. One, we're making the assumption that Gonzaga is not going to make any of those cuts, and I'm not 100% sure we should make that assumption. If the question is, would Gonzaga end up being a big winner just by virtue of not making those cuts? Yeah, that would be tremendous. If Gonzaga doesn't have to cut from their track and field program, from their tennis programs, rowing programs, any other programs that are taking up scholarships and therefore money, if they don't have to do that because they don't have to allocate huge amounts of resources to football, that is a win for Gonzaga. But we're in this era where competing in your revenue-generating sports, which for Gonzaga is men's and women's basketball, is so unbelievably crucial and critical and necessary for survival, that I don't think that we can make the assumption that Gonzaga won't hoard as much money as possible to give to those programs the same way that other programs are. I mean, like Washington State, and I know I didn't read all of Jeff's question, but he acknowledged that Washington State's had some financial issues previously. And yes, that is true. But Oregon and Washington, like, they just got a huge windfall of money and they're still making cuts to stay competitive with everybody else. I don't want to say it's greed because I understand it's survival. And if you're just a bottom feeder in that conference in the Big Ten, it's catastrophic for your programs. But it sucks that programs that have huge amounts of money are allocating so much of it to football to the point where they're cutting other student athletes. That sucks. That sucks for student athletes at those schools. I hope Gonzaga does not do that. But to assume that they will not, I think is a little foolish. They might. I hope they don't, but they might. Regardless, if they do not, Yes, I think they are a big winner. And I think the fact that Gonzaga can compete with the amount of money that the school is likely to bring in will still allow them to compete because they're allocating so much of that money to basketball. I do think that that will make it less likely that they will cut other student athletes, but I wouldn't assume that that's a guarantee either. Final question of the show comes from Pilot Cam on Instagram, who says, what team or teams are the best fit for Ryan Nembhard? Where would you most like to see him end up? So I saw a mock draft that I really liked. I believe it was from ESPN that had the Los Angeles Clippers taking Ryan Nembhard at number 51 overall. And with their 30th overall pick, they took Ryan Kalkbrenner out of Creighton. Nembhard and Kalkbrenner were, of course, teammates at Creighton for 2 years before Nembhard transferred to Gonzaga. But looking at the Clippers and kind of digging into their roster, Patty Mills is about to be a free agent. That's right. St. Mary's legend Patty Mills still in the NBA. Ben Simmons is about to be a free agent. He was kind of their third string point guard because teams haven't really figured out what to do with him yet. So the Clippers, they're in a win now mode. They have James Harden, they have Kawhi Leonard, they have Norman Powell, they have Zubac, their starting center. Like, that's a team that is in win now mode. They want to draft guys who can contribute right away. They lost a couple of backup point guards to James Harden. Ryan Nembhard makes a ton of sense. He could be a facilitator. He could be a guy who comes in, third string point guard. In a pinch, he can navigate the pick and roll. He can get other teammates open. He can take some pressure off of Harden by being an on-ball guard. I think that's a really nice fit for him. And I think Kalkbrenner is a nice fit there, by the way, backing up Zubac. So I really like that draft for them. A couple other teams, Cleveland has come up a few times. They have 2 picks late in the second round, 49 and 58 overall. Makes sense to have him behind Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on a win now team, a more, a more facilitating type point guard than the score first guards that Cleveland already has in the mix. Obviously, Indiana's fun. Obviously, Indiana's a really fun fit for him because he'd be teammates with his brother, Andrew Nembhard. Unfortunately, the Pacers may have more of a need for Ryan Nembhard. I say unfortunately. It's not unfortunate for Ryan. It's unfortunate in the sense that Tyrese Halliburton, their best player, 7 minutes into Game 7 of the NBA Finals, shredded his Achilles. It was devastating. If you watched it, I know we all felt it. If you're human, you felt emotions watching that. It was very, very heartbreaking to see Halliburton's going to miss the entire next season. So the Pacers may be in a situation where they want a guard like Ryan to be able to come in and kind of help bridge the gap before Halliburton comes back. I could see that. I think Andrew will end up playing more point guard next year. So I could see Ryan coming in and kind of being his brother's backup almost. It's a potential fun situation that could come out of this tragedy for Indiana and Tyrese Halliburton. There's a couple other teams that make sense too. I'll toss Orlando out there. They traded Cole Anthony in the deal to get Desmond Bane. They're a little bit more thin at point guard now. Ryan Nembhard could come in, be a bit of a backup to Jalen Suggs. I think that would be super fun. Orlando has 2 picks in the second round, 46 and 57. And then got to toss Toronto in there as well. Toronto's number 39. The Raptors are more in rebuild mode, so I think they might kind of take shots on younger, like higher upside players. But at 39 in this draft, with that's where they'd love a Tahad Pettiford or a LeBaron Philon or a Boogie Fland. But all those guys went back to school. Like every single one of those guys were freshmen who went back to school. If they could have gotten a jitterbug freshman point guard like Pettiford to develop, I think they'd be thrilled. But those guys aren't there. So why not take a Canadian in Ryan Nembhard who grew up rooting for the Raptors? Get some homegrown, get a guy in there who's from the same country, who's a fan of the program, get some good PR from that, and get a guy who can help contribute to your team right away. Like, I think that makes a ton of sense for Toronto at 39, depending on how the draft shakes out. I wouldn't be surprised if they give him a strong look there. Those are just a few. I've never hidden the fact that I'm a Blazers fan. I would love any Zag on the Portland Trail Blazers. I don't know, depending what they do with their first round pick. If they take a Kasparas Yakichonis or a Igor Damin, then they probably don't need Nembhard. If they don't, maybe they take a shot on him. They don't have a second round pick, so that's part of the problem for wanting him to go to Portland. Is that means I'm either rooting for Portland to trade into the second round or for Ryan to go undrafted, which I don't want. But would be quite happy to have a jersey with the Portland logo on the front and Nembhard's name on the back. That would be quite cool. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Like I said, I'll be back with the show on Tuesday talking more about this Pac-12 CBS deal, more about the NBA Finals and Chet and Andrew's performances. We'll get to that. Then we'll get you ready for the NBA draft as it's starting on Wednesday and then finishing on Thursday. So we'll get you some updates on that as well. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.